across mountains, deserts, flooded rivers, and more than 2,000 kilometers of dangerous road. A sealed command from the Persian king could reach the far edge of his empire in only days. No rider crossed the entire distance, and no horse carried the message for long. Instead, Persia created an extraordinary relay network that turned roads, stations, scribes, and fresh horses into the nervous system of an empire. Before we follow the royal courier into the darkness, take a moment to like the video and subscribe for more forgotten stories from the ancient world. A rider emerges from the darkness before dawn, already exhausted, his horse white with sweat and road dust. Behind him, the mountains of western Iran are only a jagged shadow against the paling sky. Ahead lies another stretch of broken ground, another river crossing, another fortified settlement where men are waiting beside saddled horses. He carries no treasure, no weapon of unusual value, and no cargo that would interest a merchant. What he carries is smaller than a man's hand. A sealed royal order whose contents may determine whether an army marches, whether a governor keeps his position, whether grain is released from a storehouse, or whether a rebellion is crushed before it has time to spread. The message cannot stop with him. It cannot depend on his strength, his horse, or his luck. Somewhere ahead, another rider is waiting to take it, and beyond that rider waits another, and another after him. The human body will tire, horses will fail, night will fall, snow will close mountain passes, and rivers will swell beyond their banks, but the command must continue. This is the central problem at the heart of the Persian Empire. It is not simply how to conquer an enormous territory. It is how to make that territory obey after the armies have moved on. By the early 5th century BCE, the Achaemenid Empire stretches farther than any political power the ancient world has yet seen. Its western edge reaches the Aegean coast and the lands of Egypt. Its eastern provinces extend towards Central Asia and the Indus Valley. Between them lie Mesopotamian plains, Iranian plateaus, Anatolian highlands, deserts, forests, river valleys, and mountain ranges where winter can isolate entire regions. The empire contains cities older than Persian rule itself. Nomadic communities moving through seasonal landscapes, ports connected to distant seas, and agricultural districts whose harvests support populations far beyond their own borders. It is a world of staggering variety. Many languages are spoken within it. Many gods are worshipped. Local elites preserve their own customs, laws, and memories. A governor in western Anatolia lives among people whose traditions differ sharply from those of officials in Egypt or Bactria. A merchant in Babylon may have more in common with the commercial habits of earlier Mesopotamian kingdoms than with the pastoral traditions of the Persian homeland. The empire does not erase these differences. In many places, it survives by working through them. Yet diversity creates distance even where geography does not. An imperial order must be understood by people who may never see the king, never visit a royal capital, and never hear the Persian language spoken in daily life. Taxes must be assessed, troops must be summoned, labour must be organised, roads must be guarded, provincial officials must report disturbances, crop failures, border movements, and disputes among local rulers. Gifts and tribute must reach the court, but information must reach it first. A king who cannot hear from the edges of his empire is not fully ruling them. He's merely hoping they remain quiet. Before we go deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, if this is the kind of history and mystery you enjoy. The scale of the Persian achievement is sometimes hidden by the familiarity of modern communication. Today, a command can cross continents in less than a second. In the ancient world, information moves only as fast as a human being, an animal, or a ship can carry it. Every hill has weight, every storm creates delay, every border crossing introduces uncertainty. A written order may be stolen, damaged, misunderstood, or deliberately ignored. A messenger may fall ill, a bridge may collapse. A local official may claim that instructions never arrived. Distance is therefore not empty space. It is an active political force. For smaller kingdoms, the problem is serious but manageable. A ruler may receive news from a frontier in a matter of days. In the Persian Empire, the delay can become long enough for reality to change before the royal court even learns what has happened. A provincial revolt may begin, gather followers, seize stores, and destroy loyal officials while the king remains unaware. An invading force may cross a boundary before reinforcements are ordered. A governor may take advantage of silence to behave like an independent ruler. The empire's enemies understand this weakness. So do its officials. The farther a province lies from the royal court, the easier it becomes for ambition to grow in the space between command and response. The Persians do not solve this problem by creating a single capital from which every decision flows. Their kings move among several royal centres, including Susa, Babylon, Ecbatana, and Persepolis. This mobility reflects the geography and traditions of the empire, but it creates another challenge. The location of the king may shift with the season or the needs of government. Archives, officials, guards, servants, and supplies move with the court. Messages must not simply travel from the centre to the edge. They must find the centre wherever the centre happens to be. Royal authority is therefore less like a fixed point and more like a moving presence held together by roads, stations, scribes, seals, and people trained to keep information flowing. What survives in the record suggests that the Persian kings understood this with unusual clarity. Their empire is often remembered for monumental palaces, stone reliefs, royal tombs, armies, and vast wealth. But some of its greatest power lies in systems that leave far less dramatic remains. A road does not inspire the same wonder as a carved gateway guarded by colossal figures. A relay station rarely survives as impressively as a palace terrace. A leather document can decay until nothing remains. Yet these ordinary structures may have done more to preserve the empire than many of its monuments. The Persian state does not invent long-distance communication from nothing. Earlier kingdoms in Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the Near East had used messengers, roads, way stations, and systems of official correspondence. Assyrian rulers had already developed methods for moving information across large territories, and older trade routes had connected important cities for centuries. The Persians inherit this landscape of movement. Their achievement lies in gathering existing routes, improving them, securing them, and placing them within a wider imperial design. The result is sometimes described as an ancient postal system, although the modern phrase can be misleading. This is not a public service available to anyone wishing to send a private letter. It is a controlled network created for the business of power. Access depends on authority. The horses, provisions, and stations exist primarily to serve the king and the administration that acts in his name. For those included within it, the network can seem astonishingly fast. For those outside it, the same journey remains slow, expensive, and dangerous. An ordinary traveller may spend weeks or months covering a distance that an official message can cross in a fraction of the time. The difference is not that royal messengers possess superhuman endurance. It is that the empire refuses to let the message become exhausted. A private traveller must rest when his horse tires. He must find food, negotiate shelter, search for safe crossings, and wait for favourable conditions. A royal dispatch enters a prepared chain. Fresh mounts wait at intervals. Supplies are reserved. Officials know the routes. Local authorities are expected to assist. The rider may stop, but the message continues. This distinction matters because later stories often turn the Persian courier into a lone heroic figure racing across the world without sleep. The reality is more organized and, in some ways, more impressive. The system succeeds not by overcoming human limitations, but by designing around them. No single rider needs to cross the entire empire. No single horse needs to survive the whole road. Speed emerges from coordination. That coordination must function across landscapes that resist it. In the Zagros Mountains, roads twist through narrow valleys and steep passes where snow, rock falls, and ambushes can halt movement. Across the plains of Mesopotamia, heat and dust exhaust animals and men. In Anatolia, rivers cut across the westward route, requiring bridges, ferries, or guarded crossing points. Farther east, distances widen into dry country where water becomes the first concern and navigation itself can become dangerous. The imperial road is not one smooth paved highway running from sea to sea. It is a network of routes adapted to local terrain, inherited from earlier movement, repaired where necessary, and watched where possible. Some stretches are easy, others are punishing. The speed of the system depends not only on riders but on thousands of less visible acts feeding horses, maintaining crossings, storing grain, protecting stations, recording authorizations, and ensuring that the next relay is ready. The labour behind the famous speed is rarely celebrated. Local communities provide animals, fodder, food, and manpower. Officials supervise supplies. Scribes track deliveries. Guards protect strategic points. The imperial message flies only because many people remain in place to support it. And still the evidence remains incomplete. Much of what is known comes from scattered administrative records, later Greek descriptions, surviving road traces, and comparisons with other ancient systems. Scholars still debate the exact organization of the service, the speed achieved on different routes, and how consistently it functioned across the empire's enormous span. A well-maintained road near a major royal centre may have operated very differently from a distant frontier route during winter or war. No single description fully accounts for every province, every century, or every crisis. But the broad achievement is clear. The Persian kings create more than roads. They create a rhythm of authority. Orders leave the court, reports return, inspectors travel, taxes move, armies receive instructions, and governors are reminded that distance does not guarantee invisibility. The empire begins to behave less like a collection of conquered lands and more like a connected political body. Its roads become nerves, its stations become points of transmission, its riders carry the impulses of the state. Somewhere in the half-light, the exhausted courier reaches the next station. Men move quickly, a seal is checked, the packet changes hands. A fresh horse is brought forward, stamping in the cold air. Within moments, another rider is moving eastward, while the first finally dismounts. The king's command has crossed one more fragment of the empire. it still has thousands of kilometers to go. The road beneath the courier's horse is older than the empire that now claims it. Long before Persian kings placed their seals upon official orders, people had already been moving through these valleys, crossing these rivers, and searching for the least dangerous ways through the mountains. Traders knew where caravans could find water. Armies knew which passes could admit wagons and horses. Shepherds knew the seasonal paths between lowland pasture and upland grazing. Cities rose beside routes used so long that their beginnings disappeared into memory. This is one of the quieter truths behind imperial power. Great states often seem to create the world they dominate, but they usually inherit far more than they invent. The Persians conquer territories already threaded together by older systems of movement. Their road network grows from these earlier lines, some commercial, some military, some ceremonial, and some no more than hardened tracks widened by centuries of feet, hooves, and wheels. Across Mesopotamia, communication routes had linked cities since the earliest urban civilizations. The flat river plains encouraged movement, but the rivers also complicated it. The Tigris and Euphrates could carry boats and goods, yet they could flood, shift channels, and divide districts. Roads followed levees, irrigation works, and settlement chains. Couriers travelled between palaces, temples, and provincial officials long before the first Persian ruler entered Babylon. Farther west, Anatolia presented a different problem. Its high plateaus, mountain ranges, and deeply cut river valleys forced travellers into particular corridors. The easiest route was rarely straight. Roads bent toward bridges, fords, and defensible passes. Kingdoms such as the Hittites had depended on these corridors to connect their central lands with distant cities and frontiers. Later powers inherited many of the same solutions because the landscape allowed only a limited number of reliable choices. Movement across the Iranian plateau followed another ancient geography. Broad open spaces were interrupted by mountain chains, salt deserts, and regions where water was scarce. Settlements clustered around springs, rivers, and cultivable basins. Routes connected these islands of habitation. A traveller who left one secure water source without knowing the next could vanish into an empty horizon. The Assyrian Empire provides the clearest earlier model for what the Persians would later expand. Assyrian kings ruled large territories through military force, provincial administration, and a sophisticated system of royal correspondence. Messages moved between the court, governors, commanders, and agents stationed throughout the empire. Relay methods and official roads reduced the delays created by distance. The Assyrians understood that conquest had to be followed by reporting. A province that could not send news quickly was a province in which danger could grow unseen. Their system was harshly practical. Royal orders had priority. Officials were expected to assist authorized travelers. Horses and supplies could be requisitioned. Military roads served not only armies but information, and the movement of information often prepared the movement of armies. A report of unrest might reach the palace first. Troops would follow later along the same route. When Assyrian power collapsed at the end of the 7th century BCE, its roads did not disappear. Empires die more quickly than landscapes of habit. Bridges may decay, stations may be abandoned, and security may fail. But knowledge of how to move between major centres survives among local populations. Merchants continue to travel when they can. Communities still use the crossings that generations before them found most reliable. The Median Kingdom, which rose in parts of western Iran before Persian expansion, also occupied important corridors between Mesopotamia, the Iranian plateau, and Anatolia. The evidence for Median administration remains incomplete, and scholars still debate how centralized the Median state truly was. Later sources sometimes describe it as a powerful empire, while archaeology gives a more cautious picture. Yet whatever its exact political structure, the regions associated with Median power were already connected by routes essential to diplomacy, warfare, and trade. Cyrus the Great inherits this layered world in the 6th century BCE. His conquests bring together territories once ruled by different states, each with its own roads, officials, and habits of communication. He does not begin with a blank map. He gains access to networks that link Babylon to older Mesopotamian centers, Iranian capitals to mountain routes, and Anatolian cities to the Aegean coast. The capture of Lydia in western Anatolia is especially important. Lydia had controlled wealthy cities and trade routes reaching toward the Greek world. Its capital, Sardis, stood near the western end of the route that would later become famous as the Persian Royal Road. From there, roads led eastward across Anatolia and eventually toward Mesopotamia and the Iranian heartlands. The path was already old. Persian control gives it a new political meaning. Under Cyrus and his successors, these inherited roads become parts of a larger whole. A route once serving a regional kingdom now links one end of a transcontinental empire to another. An old military road becomes an administrative artery. A caravan path becomes useful to royal messengers. The Persians do not need to rebuild every mile. They need to identify the most valuable corridors, secure them, improve key sections, and connect them to official stations and authority. This distinction explains why the phrase royal road can create the wrong image. It suggests a single monumental highway designed in one moment by one ruler. In reality, the best-known road is a composite. It passes through landscapes with long histories and follows routes shaped by many earlier peoples. Some sections may have been repaired or redirected. Bridges and stations could be added. Security could be strengthened. But the route itself is the product of accumulated experience. The empire's genius lies in organization. It takes scattered roads and makes them answer to a central purpose. Even so, the transformation is not immediate or uniform. Roads connecting royal residences, provincial capitals, and military frontiers receive greater attention. Distant regions may rely on less formal networks. Weather, rebellion, and local neglect can damage even the most important road. What survives in the record suggests a system capable of remarkable efficiency, but not one that functioned identically everywhere. The courier moving eastward therefore rides across layers of forgotten history. Beneath the Persian station stands the memory of an older stopping place. Beneath the imperial bridge may lie the stones of an earlier crossing. The guide who knows the mountain pass may have learned it from people whose ancestors served another king. Persia's roads are powerful because Persia understands that the past can be reused. The empire does not conquer distance alone. It conquers the routes by which distance had already been crossed. By the time Darius takes the throne in 522 BCE, Persia already possesses an immense inheritance of roads, cities, provincial institutions, and conquered peoples. What it does not yet possess is certainty. The empire has expanded faster than any administration can comfortably absorb. Its territories stretch from the valleys of the Indus to the shores of the Aegean. But the death of a king has exposed how fragile that vastness can become. Rebellions erupt across the empire. Rival claimants appear. Provinces that seemed obedient begin testing how much power still reaches them from the center. Darius survives because he acts quickly, but speed in war only solves the immediate danger. Once the fighting ends, he faces the deeper problem how to prevent the empire from breaking apart again whenever royal authority appears weak. Armies can punish rebellion after it begins. A stronger system of communication might detect it earlier, isolate it, or prevent it altogether. Under Darius, the old routes of Western Asia become something closer to an imperial nervous system. Roads are not merely paths between important places. They become instruments for carrying orders outward and information inward. Their value depends on where they lead, who may use them, and how reliably the state can support movement along them. The king rules from several major centers rather than a single permanent capital. Susa in Elam becomes one of the most important administrative residences, positioned between Mesopotamia and the Iranian plateau. Babylon remains a center of enormous economic and political importance. Ecbatana offers a cooler royal residence in the highlands. Persepolis rises as a ceremonial heartland of Persian kingship. Each center must remain connected to the others, and all must remain connected to the provinces. Darius therefore strengthens routes that bind the royal court to satrapal capitals, military zones, and strategic crossings. He does not pave every road in the empire or create one uniform highway system. Ancient states lack the machinery and resources for anything so complete. Instead, the administration concentrates on important corridors, especially those used by royal officials, tribute carriers, inspectors, troops, and messengers. A road becomes truly imperial when the state can make demands along it. Local authorities must supply provisions. Animals must be available. Bridges and ferries must remain usable. Stations must be protected. Travelers carrying official authorization must be recognized and assisted. These obligations turn geography into administration. The system is closely tied to the satrapies, the large territorial units through which much of the empire is governed. Satraps oversee taxation, security, and local administration, but their power creates an obvious risk. A governor placed far from the king commands wealth, officials, and sometimes troops. Without regular communication, a satrap can begin to act less like a servant and more like a ruler. Roads reduce that independence. Orders can arrive more quickly. Reports can bypass local elites. Inspectors can appear with less warning. A governor never knows exactly what information has already reached the court or which royal agent may be approaching. Distance still protects ambition, but less completely than before. The famous building inscription at Susa offers a glimpse of the scale of organization under Darius. Materials and craftsmen are brought from many regions: cedar from Lebanon, timber from Gandhara, gold from Lydia and Bactria, stone from distant quarries, and skilled workers from across the empire. The palace is not merely a display of wealth. It is evidence that people, goods, instructions, and records can be coordinated across enormous distances. Every beam and stone implies communication. Someone must identify the material, order its collection, arrange its transport, provide labor, confirm delivery, and report failure. Monumental architecture depends on the invisible messages long before it becomes visible stone. The same is true of taxation and military service. Different provinces contribute different forms of wealth. Some provide silver, others grain, livestock, timber, horses, or specialized troops. These obligations cannot be managed through occasional royal visits. They require schedules, records, inspections, and repeated correspondence. The empire's strength is not simply that it collects resources from many lands, but that it can coordinate when and where those resources are needed. Darius also standardizes parts of imperial life. Coinage, weights, measures, administrative languages, and legal practices become more consistent in some regions, though local traditions continue. Roads work within this wider pattern. They allow standards to travel and make it possible for the court to compare one province with another. Yet the empire is never as centralized as a modern state. Local rulers, priests, temple institutions, and established elites retain considerable influence. The Persian administration often governs through existing structures rather than replacing them. This flexibility is one reason the empire survives, but it also means control is uneven. A command that is clear in Susa may be interpreted differently hundreds of kilometers away. Scholars still debate how directly Darius planned the road network and how much later tradition exaggerates the neatness of his reforms. The evidence remains incomplete, and surviving records are far richer for some regions than for others. It is unlikely that every road followed an identical system or that every station operated with the same efficiency. What survives nevertheless suggests a deliberate effort to make the empire more connected, more observable, and more responsive. Darius does not merely inherit routes, he gives them hierarchy. Certain roads matter because they join royal centers. Certain stations matter because official travelers pass through them. Certain messengers matter because they carry the authority of the king. The road itself becomes a political statement. A guarded crossing, a prepared horse, or a reserved store of grain tells nearby communities that the empire expects movement to continue. Even when the king is far away, the infrastructure of his authority is present. Across the mountains and plains, riders begin to move within a system that is larger than any one of them understands. One carries a tax order, another carries news of unrest. A third bears instructions for troops near a frontier. Their journeys overlap, separate, and disappear into the distance. But together they create a flow that holds the empire in shape. Darius cannot eliminate distance, he can only make it less powerful. And for an empire that nearly shattered before his reign was secure, that achievement is enough to change everything. From Susa, the road westward begins in a world of heat, cultivated lowlands, and old cities. The royal residence stands near the edge of the Iranian plateau, positioned where routes from the Persian heartland meet the broad plains of Mesopotamia. A message leaving the court does not enter an empty wilderness. It moves through one of the most densely settled and historically layered regions of the ancient world, where canals, farms, market towns, temples, and administrative centers have shaped movement for centuries. The best-known route associated with the Persian courier system runs from Susa to Sardis, the former Lydian capital near the Aegean coast. Later Greek descriptions make this road famous, but the journey is difficult to imagine as a single line. It is closer to a sequence of connected landscapes, each demanding different skills, animals, supplies, and forms of protection. Measured by ancient accounts and reconstructed routes, the distance is roughly 2,400 kilometers, though the exact path remains debated and may have changed over time. The first major obstacle rises almost immediately. West and northwest of Susa, the Zagros Mountains form a vast wall of ridges, valleys, and high passes. These mountains do not present one clean barrier. They are a complicated zone of broken terrain where roads twist around steep slopes and follow river valleys through narrow corridors. In winter, snow can block the higher passes. In spring, melting water can transform streams into dangerous torrents. Even in good weather, a mounted traveller must conserve the horse's strength while climbing over rough ground. The road depends on local knowledge. Riders must know which pass remains open, where water can be found, and which valley leads toward the next settlement rather than into a dead end. Guides, station keepers, and communities along the route become as important as the courier himself. Imperial maps, if they existed in practical administrative form, could not replace familiarity with the land. Beyond the mountains lies Mesopotamia, where the road enters a different world. The terrain becomes flatter, but movement is not necessarily easier. The great river systems support dense agriculture and wealthy cities, yet they also create obstacles. The Tigris, Euphrates, and their tributaries must be crossed by bridges, ferries, boats, or carefully chosen fords. Seasonal floods can destroy approaches and force long detours. Mud can slow wheel traffic almost as effectively as mountain snow. For a royal message, these crossings cannot be left entirely to chance. Important bridges and ferries require maintenance, guards, and labour. A delayed ferry or damaged bridge can interrupt the entire relay. What looks like a small local failure may prevent orders from reaching an army hundreds of kilometres away. The road passes near or through cities whose histories stretch back long before Persian rule. Babylon remains one of the most important urban centres in the empire, with its scribes, temples, storehouses, and enormous population. Other settlements provide food, animals, craftsmen, and officials. The courier's speed depends on these settled landscapes, but cities also create risks. Crowded roads, local disputes, theft, and political tension can make movement unpredictable. A message may be more exposed in a busy administrative centre than on an empty stretch of road. Farther northwest, the route approaches the upper Tigris and the regions later known to Greek writers as Armenia. Here the land rises again into high plateaus and mountain valleys. Winters can be severe, and snow may remain long after lower regions have begun to warm. The road must cross districts where settlements are farther apart and where weather can change rapidly. Horses suited to the plains may struggle in steep or icy country, making local remounts especially valuable. Ancient descriptions count numerous rivers along the road, some crossed by bridges and others by ferries. Herodotus lists major waterways and measures the journey through stages and stopping places, but his account raises as many questions as it answers. Scholars still debate the exact identification of several rivers and whether every stage belonged to one fixed route. The road likely shifted where bridges failed, political conditions changed, or new administrative centres became more important. From the highlands, the route continues into central and eastern Anatolia. This is a land of broad plateaus divided by mountain chains, with hot, dry summers and cold winters. A traveller may cross open country for long distances before reaching another town. Dust becomes a constant companion in the warmer months, working into clothing, eyes, and the leather of saddles and bags. During winter, the same open spaces offer little shelter from wind and snow. The road passes through or near territories associated with older kingdoms, including the former Hittite heartlands and the regions once contested by Assyrians, Lydians, and local Anatolian powers. Ruined fortifications and abandoned settlements stand beside living communities. The Persian network overlays older political landscapes without entirely erasing them. As the route moves west, the environment becomes greener, river valleys widen, agriculture intensifies, and towns grow more frequent. The final approach to Sardis descends toward the rich lands of western Anatolia. Sardis itself stands beneath a steep acropolis, protected by natural height and positioned near valuable routes and resources. Before the Persian conquest, it had been the capital of Lydia, a kingdom associated with wealth, metalworking, and some of the earliest widespread coinage. Under Persian rule, Sardis becomes more than a conquered capital. It is the empire's great western gateway. From here, royal officials can communicate with the cities of the Aegean coast, military commanders, local dynasts, and diplomatic contacts beyond formal Persian territory. News from the Greek world enters the road system here, just as orders from the king leave it. The route from Susa to Sardis is famous because ancient writers describe it, not necessarily because it is the only or even always the most important road. Other routes connect Persepolis, Babylon, Egypt, Central Asia, and the eastern provinces. Sea travel may carry messages along coastlines where conditions allow. Local roads branch toward provincial capitals and military posts. The empire functions through a network rather than a single royal artery. Still, this western road reveals the scale of the Persian challenge better than almost any other. A message must climb mountains, cross rivers, survive extreme weather, pass through many cultures, and reach a destination thousands of kilometers from the court. Every region presents a new weakness that could break the chain. Yet the road also reveals the strength of the system. The Persians do not force one rider to master every landscape. They divide the journey into manageable stages. Men familiar with one district carry the message through it, then pass it onward. Fresh horses replace tired ones. Supplies wait where the road requires them. The empire adapts its method to the terrain instead of pretending the terrain does not exist. By the time a royal order reaches Sardis, no single traveller can claim to have crossed the empire. The message alone has completed the journey. It arrives carrying the same seal, the same authority, and the same urgency with which it left Susa, while the riders who moved it have already disappeared back into their local roads. That is the true achievement of the royal road. It turns a landscape of barriers into a sequence of handovers. The road becomes truly fast only where the stations begin. Without them, the imperial route is merely a long and difficult path, useful to armies, traders, and travellers, but still limited by the endurance of a single animal and rider. The station changes the nature of movement. It divides an impossible journey into a series of shorter ones, each supported by people who may never know what the message contains, but understand that it must not be delayed. Along the route between Susa and Sardis, ancient accounts describe more than 100 stopping places. The exact number varies according to how stages are counted, and scholars still debate the location of many sites, but the overall pattern is clear. At regular intervals, official travellers could find shelter, food, water, and fresh animals. Some stations may have been substantial compounds with courtyards, storerooms, stables, guards, and administrative rooms. Others were probably smaller installations adapted to the needs of the terrain and the traffic passing through them. They were not all identical. A station near a wealthy city might draw on large markets, skilled workers, and abundant grain. A mountain post could be little more than a fortified shelter beside a difficult pass, with limited space for animals and only enough supplies to survive periods of isolation. In dry country, the station's most valuable feature might be a protected well. Near a major river, it might depend on ferrymen, boatmen, and labourers responsible for maintaining the crossing. Whatever their form, the stations had to remain prepared. A courier could arrive during daylight or darkness, in summer heat or winter rain. alone or accompanied by officials and guards. There was little value in a relay system if the next horse had wandered into pasture, if the stable keeper was absent, or if the grain store had been emptied by local demands. Readiness was the hidden discipline of the network. The arrival began before the rider reached the gate. Hoofbeats carried across the road, or a watcher spotted dust rising in the distance. Men at the station moved toward the stable. A horse was led out, already fed and watered. Leather straps were checked. A saddle cloth was positioned. Lamps might be lit if the courier appeared after sunset. The message was not simply handed to the first available person. Authorization mattered, and the seal or travel document had to be recognized. The surviving evidence does not reveal one universal procedure, and no single explanation fully accounts for practices across the entire empire. Some messages may have been transferred from rider to rider. In other cases, a courier may have changed horses and continued himself for several stages. The method likely depended on the urgency of the order, the route, local organization, and the rank of the traveler. What mattered was that the system could replace exhausted resources before exhaustion became delay. Horses were its most obvious necessity, but they were not the only animals involved. Mules and donkeys were better suited to certain loads and difficult ground, while camels may have served routes through arid regions for a rapid dispatch. However, the availability of strong riding horses was critical. They had to be selected, trained, fed, shod or otherwise cared for according to regional practice, and replaced when injured or worn down. Maintaining these animals required a constant flow of fodder. Barley, hay, straw, and water had to be stored or obtained from nearby communities. A single horse consumes resources steadily even when no messenger arrives. A group of official travelers could strain a small station within hours. The network therefore depended on agricultural production far beyond the visible road. The people who kept the stations functioning are mostly nameless. Stable workers groomed horses and treated wounds. Servants prepared food and bedding. Guards watched the road and protected stores. Scribes recorded the movement of animals, supplies, and authorized travelers. Craftsmen repaired saddles, bridles, wheels, doors, and roof beams. Local officials arranged replacement stock and answered complaints when imperial demands became too heavy. Their work rarely appears in grand narratives of conquest, yet the famous speed of Persian communication rests on these routines. A rider moving swiftly through the night is dramatic. A worker measuring grain into a storage jar is not. But without the grain, the horse does not run. The stations also served travellers whose journeys were slower than the couriers. Royal inspectors, military officers, envoys, tax officials, and members of the court might use the same network. Some travelled with servants, baggage animals, documents, and armed escorts. Their arrival required more food, space, and organisation than a single messenger. A station could therefore resemble a changing mixture of stable, inn, warehouse, checkpoint, and administrative office. Though it was never simply a public roadside inn in the modern sense, ordinary travellers might benefit indirectly from the security and infrastructure surrounding the route, but they did not automatically receive access to royal provisions. This system was privileged. An authorization allowed its bearer to demand resources that others had to purchase, carry, or go without. This made the road faster for the state while sometimes making it burdensome for the population supporting it. Administrative tablets from Persepolis offer a glimpse into this world of controlled travel. They record rations issued to officials, workers, messengers, and other travelers moving under authority. These documents do not describe every station or route, but they reveal how carefully movement could be accounted for. A journey left a trail of grain, wine, flour, animals, and written approvals. The imperial road was sustained by paperwork as much as by stone and earth. The lesser-known surprise is how ordinary the machinery of speed was. There was no mysterious technology hidden behind the Persian achievement. The system relied on predictable supplies, trusted documents, disciplined labor, and the decision to prepare the next stage before it was needed. Its sophistication lay not in any single invention, but in the coordination of thousands of small obligations. At night, a station might appear quiet from the road, a lamp burns beside the gate, horses shift in the stable, a guard listens to the wind and the distant sound of water. Most hours pass without urgency, then hoofbeats emerge from the darkness, and the entire purpose of the place becomes visible. The arriving horse slows, the courier dismounts or reaches for a fresh set of reins. A sealed packet changes hands beneath the light. Within minutes, the road is empty again. Behind the departing rider, the station returns to waiting. Another horse is fed, another ration is recorded, another bed is prepared for a traveller who may never use it. The silence is not inactivity, it is readiness, stretched across more than 100 points between the king and the western edge of his empire. The relay works because the empire accepts a simple truth: speed does not come from forcing one man or one horse beyond its limits. It comes from replacing them before those limits are reached. The road between Susa and Sardis is too long, too varied, and too dangerous for a single courier to cross at full pace. Even the strongest animal would slow, stumble, or break down after repeated hard riding. A human rider might endure longer, but exhaustion would eventually dull his judgment, weaken his grip, and turn every rough descent into a risk. The Persians make the journey faster by dividing it. A message leaving the royal court enters a chain of prepared movement. The first rider knows only the stretch ahead of him, perhaps a distance of several dozen kilometers, depending on terrain and station spacing. On a good road across open country, he can cover ground quickly. In mountains or winter weather, the same distance may demand far more time and caution. His task is not to reach the final destination. His task is to reach the next point before delay begins to accumulate. The relay principle appears simple when described from a distance, but it depends on exact timing. The station ahead must have a sound horse available. The animal must be rested, fed, and fitted with usable equipment. Someone must recognize the courier's authority. The packet must be passed securely. If the rider continues, he must transfer himself quickly from one mount to another. If a new rider takes over, he must already know the route and be ready to leave without long preparation. Every minute saved at one station is small. Across more than 100 stages, those minutes become hours or days. The horses are the system's living engines. Persian lands were famous for producing strong animals, and different regions supplied breeds suited to different conditions. The highlands of western Iran and Media were associated with valuable horses, while other provinces provided their own stock. Royal power displayed itself through cavalry, tribute animals, and breeding grounds. But the communication network required something less spectacular and more dependable. Horses capable of repeated short bursts of sustained movement. A relay horse did not need to cross a continent. It needed to run one stage well. That requirement changed how animals could be used. Instead of pacing a horse cautiously to preserve it for a week-long journey, a rider could demand greater speed over a shorter distance. The animal would then rest, be fed, and eventually returned to service. This did not make the work gentle. Horses could still be injured, overworked, or lost. Roads were hard on hooves and joints. Heat caused dehydration. Cold stiffened muscles. Sudden stones, holes, or slippery slopes could bring down both horse and rider. The evidence remains incomplete regarding the exact breeding, training, and veterinary practices used at every station. Much of what can be reconstructed comes from administrative texts, later descriptions, and broader knowledge of ancient horsemanship. Scholars still debate how standardized the system truly was. A major station near a royal centre may have maintained excellent animals and experienced staff, while a remote post could have struggled with poor fodder, damaged equipment, or too few mounts. Human skill mattered as much as animal strength. A rider had to judge pace without destroying the horse too early. He needed to read the road, control the animal on steep ground, and keep the message protected in rain, dust, or snow. He had to know where danger was likely and when speed would create more risk than delay. A reckless courier could lose the dispatch in a ravine and cost the Empire more time than a cautious one. Local knowledge therefore made the relay more efficient. A man familiar with one section of road understood its difficult corners, seasonal hazards, and reliable water sources. He knew where the surface became soft after rain, where bandits might watch a narrow pass, and where a river crossing became dangerous after snowmelt. Dividing the route among regional riders allowed the system to use this knowledge repeatedly. Yet it is uncertain whether every message always changed riders at every station. Some couriers may have remained with the dispatch through several stages, changing only horses. This would reduce the number of transfers and the risk of confusion, while still preserving speed through fresh mounts. Other messages may have passed from one rider to the next, especially on well-organized routes where specialists served fixed sections. The method may have varied according to importance. A routine administrative report could travel differently from an urgent military order. A high-ranking official might carry documents personally while using the network for horses and provisions. A sealed packet whose contents were known only at its destination might remain with a trusted courier longer than an ordinary message. No single surviving source gives a complete rulebook. What matters is that the Persian state created alternatives to the slow journey of one traveller. It could replace the horse, the rider, or both. Each replacement removed fatigue from the message, even though the people and animals carrying it remained vulnerable. The transfer itself had to be controlled. A packet might be wrapped, sealed, and attached to the courier's clothing or equipment. Clay seals, impressed with official designs, could reveal interference. Documents written on leather or other perishable materials had to be protected from weather. A message soaked in a river or torn during a fall could become useless even if the courier survived. At a station, the handover may have lasted only moments. The arriving rider presented his authorization. The seal was inspected for visible damage. The next courier received the packet and secured it before mounting. There was no need for him to understand its contents. In fact, secrecy might depend on his ignorance. This separation between carrier and message was another source of strength. The system did not rely on memory alone. Oral messengers had served ancient rulers for centuries, but spoken instructions could be distorted by fatigue, misunderstanding, fear, or deliberate alteration. Written and sealed orders preserved wording more effectively, while the relay carried them faster than an ordinary traveller could. Still, writing did not eliminate uncertainty. A document could be forged, a seal could be copied, a rider could be bribed. captured or killed. A station official might delay a message for political reasons. During rebellion, the road itself could become contested. The same network that strengthened royal control could also reveal where that control was weakest. The relay therefore depended on trust distributed across many strangers. Most would never meet the king. Many would not speak his native language. Yet each was expected to perform one small task correctly: prepare the horse, verify the authorization, guard the packet, ride the stage, record the ration, or maintain the crossing. The famous speed of the system emerged from this chain of ordinary reliability. A horse runs until foam gathers at its mouth and its breathing becomes harsh. The station appears ahead. Another animal waits under a stable roof, alert and restless, unaware that somewhere far away a king has made a decision. The rider reaches the courtyard, transfers the packet, and the next stage begins before the first horse has stopped trembling. The men change, the horses change, the road changes beneath them. The message does not. Before the first horse runs, the message begins in a quieter place. It may start in a royal chamber at Susa, in an administrative office near the court, or in a provincial headquarters where officials wait for instructions from the king. The decision itself may be spoken aloud, but speech is only the beginning. To cross the empire, authority must be turned into an object small enough to carry, clear enough to understand, and secure enough to survive many hands. A scribe listens carefully. He does not merely copy words, he shapes them into the language and form expected by the administration. The king may speak Old Persian at court, while the document intended for provincial use is written in Imperial Aramaic or another language suitable for the destination. In some cases, the message may be translated more than once before it reaches the official responsible for acting upon it. The empire's size makes translation unavoidable, and every translation carries the possibility of error. The order must therefore be precise. A vague command becomes more dangerous with distance. A governor, thousands of kilometers away, cannot easily ask what the king meant. If the document concerns taxes, troop movements, supplies, appointments, or punishment, even a small ambiguity can produce costly consequences. Scribes trained in administrative conventions help reduce that danger by using familiar formulas, titles, and structures. Once the text is complete, it may be copied for the archive. The surviving record suggests that important decisions often left more than one documentary trace, though much has vanished because leatherst, papyrus, and other writing materials decay easily. A copy preserved near the court allows officials to confirm what was sent if later disputes arise. Without such records, a governor could claim that an order was misunderstood, altered, or never received. The original document is then folded, rolled, wrapped, or enclosed according to its material and purpose. A seal marks its authority. The seal is not decoration. It identifies the office or individual responsible for the message and provides visible evidence if the packet has been opened. A broken or replaced seal does not automatically reveal who interfered with it, but it warns the recipient that the contents may no longer be trusted. Seals also create a language of power that can be recognized without reading the document itself. A station keeper may not know what the order says, but he can understand that the packet belongs to royal business. An official at the destination can judge whether it comes from the king, a satrap, a military commander, or another authorized office. In an empire where many languages are spoken, an image impressed into clay or wax can carry authority across linguistic boundaries. The courier who receives the packet may know little about its contents. This ignorance is useful. A rider cannot reveal plans he has never read. If captured or questioned, he may be able to identify only the sender, the route, and the intended destination. Yet secrecy is never complete. The urgency of the journey, the rank of the escort, or the direction of travel can itself reveal something. A sudden stream of messages toward a frontier may suggest that armies are being prepared even when the documents remain sealed. The first courier leaves the court carrying more than the order. He also carries proof that he is entitled to use the royal network. Without authorization, any traveller could demand fresh horses, food, shelter, and assistance in the king's name. The system would collapse under fraud. Documents, seals, tablets, or other official credentials distinguish legitimate traffic from private movement. At the first station, the process is repeated in miniature. The rider arrives, his authority is checked, the packet is examined for obvious damage, a fresh horse or a new courier waits. The transfer must be swift, but not careless. A message sent toward the wrong road could lose days. Two packets traveling in opposite directions could be confused. An incomplete record might later make it impossible to determine where a delay occurred. The lesser-known reality of rapid communication is that speed depends heavily on clerical discipline. The dramatic image belongs to the galloping horse, but the system is equally shaped by people writing names, counting rations, marking departures, and checking seals. A missing line in a station record can create uncertainty hundreds of kilometers later. The Persian network moves quickly because it treats movement as something that must be documented. As the message passes westward, its carriers change repeatedly. One rider knows the mountain path beyond Susa. Another understands the river crossings of Mesopotamia. A third is familiar with the cold uplands farther north. None needs to know the entire road. Each person carries the order through a small portion of the empire and then releases it to someone else. This is where later imagination often distorts the system. The famous courier becomes a solitary hero racing from the king to the distant frontier, refusing sleep and overcoming every obstacle by endurance alone. Such stories are memorable because they give the achievement a single face. The true system is harder to picture. It is distributed among hundreds of riders, station workers, stable hands, guards, scribes, translators, and local officials. No one person performs the miracle, the organization does. Each handover also creates risk. A courier may arrive before the next rider is ready. A station may have only one healthy horse. A seal may appear damaged, forcing officials to decide whether the message should continue. Heavy rain may blur writing if the wrapping fails. A rider may take the packet toward the wrong branch of the road. The evidence remains incomplete on how such failures were investigated. But a state that depended on reliable correspondence must have developed procedures for assigning responsibility. The chain also has to balance speed against security. Passing the packet too frequently increases the number of people who handle it. Keeping it with one courier for too long increases fatigue and dependence on a single person. The ideal method may have varied according to the importance of the order. Scholars still debate whether riders usually changed at every stage, or whether trusted couriers commonly continued across several stations while changing horses. What survives suggests flexibility rather than one rigid rule. An urgent military command may have been rushed through with minimal delay. A sensitive diplomatic letter might remain with the selected envoy. Routine reports could travel in batches. Heavy administrative records might move more slowly with pack animals, while a short sealed order crossed the same distance at far greater speed. The message itself remains physically small. but its meaning grows heavier as it approaches its destination. A command to assemble troops may disturb entire districts. An appointment may replace one powerful family with another. An order to release grain can determine whether a city survives a shortage. The courier sees only the road, but behind him political consequences begin unfolding. At Sardis, the packet reaches the final station within the imperial chain. It may pass into the hands of a satrap, a military officer, or a senior scribe. The seal is inspected. The wrapping is opened. The words composed days earlier in a distant royal court appear again beneath western light. The orders crossed mountains, rivers, languages, and more human hands than the recipient can count. None of those hands has changed its authority. None has needed to understand the whole journey. The empire has moved a decision without moving the king. The packet opened at Sardis may contain words composed far away, but those words do not necessarily arrive in the language first spoken at the Persian court. An empire stretching from Egypt to Central Asia cannot function through one tongue alone. Its subjects speak Egyptian, Babylonian, Elamite, Greek, Lydian, Persian, and many regional languages whose traces survive only faintly. The road carries messages across geography, but scribes must carry meaning across language. This is where Imperial Aramaic becomes one of the least visible and most important tools of Persian rule. Aramaic had already spread widely across the Near East before the rise of the Achaemenid Empire. It was used by merchants, administrators, and earlier states because its writing system was practical and because Aramaic-speaking communities lived across broad regions. The Persians adopt and expand this usefulness. Rather than forcing every province to conduct administration in Old Persian, they rely heavily on Aramaic as a shared written medium. That choice is revealing. Old Persian is the language of the ruling dynasty and appears in monumental royal inscriptions, often beside Babylonian and Elamite versions. It expresses kingship, conquest, legitimacy, and the favour of the god Ahura Mazda. Yet the daily administration of an empire requires something different from monumental declarations. It requires letters, receipts, travel permits, lists, orders, reports, and instructions that can move between officials who do not share the king's native language. Aramaic serves this quieter purpose. A royal decision may begin in Persian speech. A court scribe or translator renders it into Aramaic for transmission. When it reaches Egypt, Anatolia, or another province, local scribes may interpret it into the language used by the official or community expected to obey. The message can therefore pass through several linguistic layers without changing its political source. This process is efficient, but it is not simple. Translation is never a perfect transfer of words. Administrative titles may have no exact equivalent. Local legal traditions may understand property, taxation, military duty, or religious privilege differently. A phrase that seems precise at the royal court may become uncertain when applied in a distant village. Scribes must do more than know vocabulary. They must understand institutions. The empire depends on people capable of standing between worlds. Many of these scribes come from traditions older than Persian rule. Babylonian scholars continue writing in cuneiform. Elamite remains important in the administration around Persepolis. Egyptian scribes work within systems that reach back thousands of years. Greek appears increasingly in Western regions. The Persians do not remove these traditions. They place them beside a broader imperial language and use whichever form best suits the task. The result is not linguistic uniformity, but controlled plurality. At Persepolis, Administrative tablets reveal this complexity. Many are written in Elamite rather than Persian. They record rations, labour, livestock, journeys, and the distribution of goods. Some refer to documents in Aramaic that have not survived, probably because they were written on leather or papyrus instead of clay. The clay tablets remain because fire, collapse, and burial preserved them. The lighter documents that once moved more easily along roads have mostly disappeared. This creates a strange imbalance in the evidence. Historians can study thousands of durable records never intended to travel far, while many of the actual letters carried across the empire have vanished. The courier network was built around portable materials, but portability often meant vulnerability to decay. Leather was especially useful for long-distance communication. It was lighter than clay, less fragile during travel, and could be folded or rolled. Papyrus was also convenient where available, especially in Egypt and regions connected to its trade. Wooden writing boards coated with wax may have served temporary purposes. The exact mixture of materials varied by place, purpose, and access. A clay tablet can survive underground for millennia, but it is heavy and awkward on horseback. A leather letter can cross mountains and rivers, then vanish within generations. The better a document serves the messenger, the less likely it is to survive for archaeologists. Seals partly compensate for this fragility by leaving more durable traces. Officials use stamp seals or cylinder seals to mark documents, containers, doors, and goods. A seal impression can identify authority even when the writing is hidden. Images of royal figures, heroic combat, animals, divine symbols, or formal designs become signatures understood within administrative culture. The seal also protects hierarchy. Not every official has the right to issue commands in the same way. A satrap's instruction differs from a royal order. A local administrator cannot simply imitate the authority of the king without risking detection. The visual identity of a seal helps recipients judge where a document stands within the chain of command. Forgery remains possible. Skilled craftsmen can copy designs, and corrupt officials can misuse legitimate seals. Scholars still debate how often such fraud occurred, because evidence of successful deception rarely announces itself. Yet the system does not need to eliminate every false document. It needs to make falsification difficult enough that most officials hesitate to risk it. The physical condition of the seal also matters. A broken closure may indicate that the message has been opened. Attestation. The courier's authorization can be checked without exposing the contents. At the destination, witnesses may observe the opening of an important order, especially if it affects powerful individuals. The act of breaking the seal marks the moment when hidden royal intention becomes public administrative action. Scribes then copy, interpret, and distribute the command. One letter may produce several local documents. A satrap receives the royal order, then issues instructions to subordinate officials. Those officials send notices to districts, storehouses, military units, or town authorities. The original message moves quickly across the empire, but its consequences spread outward through slower local networks. A single sealed packet can therefore multiply into dozens of actions. This is one reason the Persian communication system cannot be understood only by following riders. The horse carries the order between major points, but scribes give it reach after arrival. They turn a brief instruction into records, accounts, schedules, and demands. They preserve copies so that obedience can later be measured. They translate the language of kings into the routines of provinces. Their work also protects the court from ignorance. Reports travel back along the same routes, often summarized and translated before reaching senior officials. A governor may send detailed accounts, but the king is unlikely to read every local document. Scribes condense information, compare reports, and decide what deserves attention. This gives them quiet influence. The person who controls how a distant crisis is described can shape how the court responds. No single explanation fully accounts for how standardized this process was. Practices differed across regions, and much of the documentary evidence has been lost. Yet what survives suggests an administration comfortable with multilingual complexity and skilled at using existing traditions rather than replacing them. The Persian Empire does not rule because everyone speaks the same language. It rules because enough people can translate authority without allowing it to dissolve. On the road, the sealed packet appears silent. Inside it, however, several languages may already be present, the king's spoken command, the scribe's administrative wording, the recipient's local interpretation, and the future instructions that will spread through the province. The rider carries only one document. The empire hears many voices within it. The road is open across the landscape, but the system moving along it is not open to everyone. A merchant may follow the same valleys, cross the same bridges, and sleep near the same towns as a royal courier. Yet the two journeys are governed by entirely different rules. The merchant must purchase food, negotiate for animals, wait for ferries, and accept delay when weather or exhaustion intervenes. The courier carries authorization that allows him to enter a protected stream of imperial resources. The road may belong to the empire, but its speed belongs to the king. This privilege is essential because the network cannot support unlimited demand. Every fresh horse represents months or years of breeding, feeding, training, and care. Every ration issued to a traveller comes from grain that must be cultivated, collected, stored, guarded, and recorded. A station capable of serving several urgent messengers may be overwhelmed if private travellers can claim the same assistance. Access must therefore be restricted, and proof of authority becomes almost as important as the message itself. Administrative records from the Persian heartland refer to official travellers receiving provisions along approved routes. They may carry documents identifying their mission, destination, status, and entitlement to rations. The precise form of authorization probably varies across regions and periods, but the principle is clear. A person does not simply announce that he serves the king and take the best horse in the stable. His claim must be recognized by officials who are themselves accountable for what they release. A station keeper who gives away an animal without proper authority risks weakening the entire chain. The next urgent courier may arrive to find no rested mount available. Grain intended for royal business may disappear into private trade. Corrupt officials may issue supplies to relatives, favoured merchants, or local elites. The communication network therefore depends on controlling not only movement, but permission. This creates a hierarchy among travellers. At the highest level are those carrying direct royal business messengers, inspectors, military commanders, senior administrators, and envoys. Beneath them are provincial officials and authorized personnel whose journeys serve taxation, logistics, building projects, or local governance. Workers, craftsmen, and attendants may also receive rations when travelling under official orders. Their treatment is not necessarily equal. Rank, purpose, and urgency likely influence the quality and quantity of what is provided. A high official may travel with servants, guards, baggage animals, and letters of authority capable of opening storehouses along the route. A low-ranking messenger may receive only the necessities required to continue. Both move under imperial protection, but they do not experience the road in the same way. The fastest courier service is even more exclusive. The rider using prepared relays does not merely have permission to travel. He has priority. Station workers must respond quickly. Horses may be reserved for his arrival. Ferrymen and guards may be expected to interrupt other work. A delayed merchant caravan can wait until morning. An urgent royal order may cross during the night. That priority gives the courier unusual power, but it also places him under scrutiny. He cannot casually leave the route, misuse the horse, or delay for private business without risking punishment. His privilege exists only because he carries the state's urgency. Once the packet is delivered or the authorization expires, he becomes an ordinary traveler again. The same system that empowers official messengers can burden the communities living beside the road. Stations do not create food and animals from nothing. Local districts must provide them. Farmers may be required to supply grain, hay, wine, livestock, or labor. Breeders must produce replacement horses. Craftsmen repair harnesses, carts, roofs, and gates. Villagers may maintain roads, clear obstacles, or assist at river crossings. These duties can be presented as taxes, obligations, or services owed to the crown, but from the local perspective they are demands on limited resources. A district suffering a poor harvest still has to feed official travelers. A village whose animals are requisitioned may struggle to plough fields or transport its own goods. When troops, inspectors, and messengers pass through at the same time, the burden can become severe. The evidence remains incomplete on how evenly these obligations were distributed or how often communities resisted them. Some regions may have benefited from the road through increased trade, improved security, and access to royal markets. Others may have experienced it primarily as a channel through which the empire extracted food, labor, and animals. Both realities can exist at once. A major route attracts opportunity. Inns, workshops, markets, and settlements grow around regular movement. Local merchants sell provisions to travelers who lack official support. Craftsmen find work repairing equipment. Farmers gain buyers for surplus grain and fodder. News travels faster along the road, connecting communities to political and commercial events far beyond their district. Yet opportunity follows imperial priority. When royal needs increase, private needs move aside. During war, rebellion, or major construction, the state may demand more animals and supplies than local communities can comfortably provide. A system admired for its efficiency at the center may feel very different at the station where the last healthy horse has just been taken. Abuse is an obvious danger. An official carrying broad authorization might demand more than his journey requires. Local authorities may claim supplies in the king's name and divert them elsewhere. Travelers may extend permits, alter records, or use government animals for personal trade. The larger the empire becomes, the harder it is to distinguish necessary requisition from corruption. Royal inspectors and written accounting offer some protection, but they cannot eliminate the problem. A station's records may show how much grain was issued and to whom, yet a dishonest scribe can change the numbers. A village may complain that officials took animals without payment, but the complaint must travel through the same administrative structure that allowed the seizure. Scholars still debate how tightly the central court supervised such local practices. The Persian Empire is powerful. but it is not all-seeing. Its roads increase visibility without creating perfect control. In remote regions, local officials may interpret authorization broadly, especially when they believe no inspector will arrive soon. This hidden tension lies beneath the celebrated speed of the royal post. The system appears almost effortless when described from the viewpoint of the message. A packet leaves Susa and reaches Sardis with astonishing rapidity. From the viewpoint of the people maintaining the road, the same achievement consists of fields harvested, horses surrendered, storage jars emptied, and nights interrupted by riders demanding immediate service. The courier approaches a station carrying the king's seal. A merchant waiting near the gate watches workers lead out the strongest available horse. The merchant's own animal is tired, but he has no claim upon the relay mount. He will remain until morning or continue slowly at his own risk. The official rider mounts and disappears westward. The road is shared by many, but only authority can command it to run. The road does more than carry commands. It changes the balance of power between the king and everyone who governs in his name. A satrap may control a wealthy province, command troops, collect taxes, and negotiate with the local elites, but the speed of the royal network reminds him that distance is no longer the shield it once was. News can leave his territory without his permission. Orders can arrive before he has time to prepare a response. An official who appears secure in his provincial residence may already be the subject of discussion at a court hundreds of kilometers away. This is where communication becomes surveillance. The Persian king cannot personally watch every frontier, storehouse, temple district, military camp, and provincial capital. Even the most energetic ruler is limited by geography and time, but he can demand reports, compare accounts, send inspectors, and receive information through multiple channels. Roads make these channels faster. They reduce the delay between an event and the court's knowledge of it. And that reduction has political consequences far greater than the time saved. A provincial governor knows that his official report may not be the only report. Military officers, tax administrators, royal secretaries, local rulers, temple authorities, and travelling inspectors may all send information toward the court. Their accounts may agree, contradict one another, or reveal what the satrap chose to omit. The king's understanding of a province is therefore assembled from competing voices. This does not guarantee truth. Officials can lie, exaggerate, conceal, and accuse rivals. A commander may describe a minor disturbance as a dangerous rebellion to justify additional troops. A satrap may minimize unrest to protect his reputation. A tax collector may blame local resistance for shortages created by his own corruption. The road carries falsehood as efficiently as fact. Yet the existence of several reporting paths makes deception more difficult. A governor who claims that a harvest has failed may be contradicted by accounts of full storehouses. An official who reports that a district is peaceful may be exposed by urgent messages from a nearby garrison. The court may not know immediately which account is correct, but contradictions themselves become evidence that something requires investigation. The system therefore creates uncertainty for provincial elites. They do not know exactly what the king has heard. They may not know which report arrived first or whether an inspector has already left the royal residence. That uncertainty can encourage obedience even when direct supervision is weak. Royal power often works most effectively not when it sees everything, but when others believe it may see enough. The network also allows the king to intervene before local problems become irreversible. If a border commander reports unusual movement, reinforcements can be ordered. If a province falls behind in tribute, the court can demand explanation before several years of arrears accumulate. If a satrap dies unexpectedly, instructions regarding succession or temporary authority can be sent before rival factions settle the matter themselves. Speed does not remove conflict, but it shortens the period during which local actors can act without response. This is especially important during rebellion. Revolts depend on momentum. A local leader must gather supporters, secure weapons, control roads, and persuade others that imperial authority is too distant or too weak to react. Rapid communication disrupts that calculation. News of unrest can reach the court while rebels are still organizing. Loyal governors in neighboring regions can receive orders to close routes, deny supplies, or move troops. The rebellion may find itself surrounded before it fully understands that the king has been informed. The road itself becomes a strategic target for the same reason. Rebels who control a bridge or station or mountain pass can delay messages and isolate districts. Destroying a relay station may be more useful than attacking a fortified town if the goal is to blind the administration. Cutting communication does not defeat the empire, but it creates the temporary darkness in which rebellion can grow. The Persians must therefore protect key sections of the network, guard watch crossings, fortifications secure passes. Local officials are expected to maintain order near stations. Patrols may accompany valuable or sensitive traffic. The exact level of protection differs by region, and the evidence remains incomplete. But no state would invest heavily in rapid communication while leaving every stage entirely exposed. Royal surveillance extends beyond crisis. The road carries routine information that allows the court to measure performance. Tribute totals, troop numbers, ration issues, construction progress, and labor assignments can be recorded and compared. A governor is judged not only by whether his province remains quiet, but by whether resources arrive when expected. This creates a culture of accountability, though not necessarily fairness. Written records give the appearance of precision, but numbers can conceal human hardship. A province may deliver the required grain by taking seed from farmers. A road project may be completed through forced labor. An official report may praise efficiency, while villages along the route absorb the cost. The king sees the empire through documents, and documents inevitably simplify. Even so, the accumulation of records gives the court a power earlier rulers possessed only unevenly. Information from widely separated regions can be gathered in one administrative environment. Officials can compare the price of failure in one province with success in another. Patterns become visible. Repeated shortages, delayed tribute, missing animals, and unexplained troop movements may suggest negligence or disloyalty. The road turns isolated incidents into imperial knowledge. It also allows rewards to travel outward. Loyal service can be acknowledged through appointments, gifts, land grants, or favorable decisions. A commander who responds quickly to danger may gain royal favor. A local ruler who supports Persian authority may receive protection against rivals. Communication is not only a mechanism of threat, it binds provincial elites to the court by making recognition possible. This exchange is essential because the Persian Empire does not rule through fear alone. It depends on cooperation from powerful families, priests, administrators, soldiers, and regional rulers. These people need access to the king's authority, not merely protection from it. They send petitions, complaints, requests, and reports because the road offers a route through which local disputes can become royal concerns. A distant official may use the network to bypass a stronger provincial rival. A community may appeal against an abusive administrator. A military commander may request supplies without waiting for the satrap's approval. Every such message strengthens the center by making the king the final source of judgment. Of course, access is unequal. Those closest to administration are more likely to have their voices heard. A farmer in a remote village cannot easily send a complaint to Susa. His experience reaches the court only if a local scribe records it. An official accepts it, and the message enters an authorized channel. Surveillance looks downward more easily than petition travels upward. Scholars still debate how frequently the royal court intervened in local affairs, and how much autonomy satraps retained in practice. The empire is too large for continuous central direction. Governors must make decisions without waiting for instructions, especially in emergencies. The road does not eliminate provincial power. It places that power under a faster and more unpredictable form of review. The satrap in Sardis sits among accounts, petitions, military reports, and letters from local rulers. Somewhere eastward, his own dispatches are moving toward the king. Other messages may be travelling beside them, written by men whose names he does not know. He cannot see the road beyond the next station, but he understands what it represents. Every courier departing his province carries information away from him. Every courier approaching may carry the king's response. Information does not always travel in the form of a sealed letter. Sometimes it arrives on horseback in the person of an official whose presence is itself a warning. The Persian kings rely not only on messages sent from the provinces, but on agents sent into them. These travellers inspect, question, compare, and report. Later traditions remember some of them through the powerful phrase "the king's eyes and ears," an image that captures the ideal of royal oversight even though the exact organization behind it remains debated. The phrase can easily create the impression of a single secret police force spread uniformly across the empire. The reality was probably less tidy. Persian kings used inspectors, trusted nobles, military officers, scribes, messengers, and special commissioners whose duties could overlap. Some may have conducted regular reviews. Others were dispatched in response to complaints, suspicious accounts, delayed tribute, or rumors of disloyalty. The surviving evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate whether the famous title referred to fixed offices, occasional assignments, or a broader tradition of royal agents. Whatever the precise structure, the purpose is clear. A king who depends entirely on reports written by provincial governors sees only what those governors choose to reveal. Independent inspection creates another line of sight. An inspector travelling west from Susa may carry letters granting access to storehouses, garrisons, archives, and officials. He may arrive with a small escort, scribes, servants, and authority to question men far more powerful than himself under ordinary circumstances. His strength does not come from local support. It comes from the possibility that the king is waiting for his report. The journey itself is part of the inspection. Stations reveal whether horses are being maintained, whether rations are available, and whether authorized travelers are delayed. Roads show signs of neglect long before an official account admits failure. A broken bridge, an empty granary, or a garrison with too few men can contradict months of reassuring correspondence. This makes the royal route both a channel of surveillance and an object of surveillance. The same system carrying the inspector allows him to test whether the system is functioning. At a provincial capital, the satrap may receive him with ceremony. Gifts are presented, rooms are prepared, Officials gather with carefully organized records. The province appears orderly because everyone has been warned to make it appear so. Yet the inspector's real value lies in looking beyond the formal reception. He can compare written accounts with physical stores, speak to military commanders separately, and examine whether tax demands match what was actually collected. He may also hear accusations. Rival officials understand that a royal agent offers a rare opportunity to damage an enemy. One claims that the satrap keeps more troops than authorized. Another reports missing silver. A local ruler complains that imperial obligations have been increased unfairly. A temple administrator describes land seized by provincial officers. Some accusations are true, others are weapons disguised as testimony. The inspector must decide which voices deserve belief. That task is difficult because the Persian Empire governs through local elites. The people most capable of explaining corruption may also benefit from it. Records can be altered before inspection. Storehouses can be temporarily filled. Borrowed animals can be displayed as provincial property. Witnesses can be threatened or rewarded. An official who appears loyal during a visit may resume abusive practices as soon as the royal party leaves. No system of ancient inspection can eliminate deception. Travel takes time, evidence disappears, and personal alliances shape judgment. The king's eyes may themselves be blinded by gifts, friendship, fear, or ambition. The court therefore faces the same problem with inspectors that it faces with governors how to watch the watchers. One solution is overlap. A financial official may report independently of a military commander. A royal secretary may accompany an inspector. Messages can be sent through more than one route. Separate agents may visit the same province at different times. Their accounts can be compared after arrival at court. Contradictions do not automatically reveal the truth, but they make concealment more difficult. The royal family and high Persian nobility also provide trusted personnel for sensitive missions. Loyalty based on kinship and status can be valuable, though it is never guaranteed. The greatest rebellions often involve men close enough to power to understand its weaknesses. A sober inspector may be more difficult for a satrap to intimidate, but he may possess ambitions of his own. The road gives all of these agents unusual reach. Without prepared stations, an inspection tour across several provinces could consume months and become predictable long before arrival. With access to official horses and provisions, agents can move more quickly and alter routes. A governor may hear that an inspector is approaching from the east, only to discover that another royal representative has entered from the south. The uncertainty matters as much as the inspection itself. Officials who believe they may be examined without long warning are more likely to maintain records, preserve stores, and restrain obvious abuses, not because the king sees everything, but because no one knows exactly when his attention may turn toward them. The agents also carry information that cannot easily be reduced to numbers. They observe the mood of troops, the condition of roads, the loyalty of local rulers, and the atmosphere in cities. A tax report may show that silver arrived on time while concealing the anger created by its collection. An inspector can notice abandoned farms, crowded petition halls, nervous commanders, or unusual gatherings near a fortress. Such impressions are subjective, but they can warn the court of pressures that formal accounts miss. The system is not purely punitive. Inspectors may confirm that a satrap has performed well under difficult conditions. They can verify shortages, approve repairs, resolve disputes between officials, and carry petitions back to the king. A governor facing invasion or famine may welcome an honest royal agent, because the inspection provides evidence that his requests for aid are justified. Still, The arrival of the king's representative is rarely comfortable. Authority changes the room before any question is asked. Records are opened, seals are examined. Officials who normally command others must explain themselves. A provincial ruler may control thousands of soldiers, yet a single traveller carrying the right authorization can force him to answer for a missing shipment of grain. That is the deeper power of the network. It does not merely transmit information after events occur. It allows royal authority to appear physically in distant places. The king remains in Susa, Persepolis, Babylon, or Ecbatana, but his presence travels through the person of the inspector. When the visit ends, the royal party returns to the road carrying bundles of notes, copied accounts, petitions, accusations, and private observations. The province watches them depart, knowing that the official ceremony is over, but the judgment has not yet begun. Weeks later, another rider may arrive from the east. This time, he carries the answer. The road gives the Persian Empire speed, but it does not give it immunity. Every advantage created by the network depends on conditions that can fail. A bridge must remain standing, a station must remain supplied, a rider must remain loyal, and the route itself must remain under imperial control. When any one of these breaks, the message slows. When several fail at once, distance becomes dangerous again. Rebellion exposes this weakness most clearly. The first act of revolt is not always an attack on a palace or garrison. It may be the seizure of a road, a ferry, or a relay station. A rebel leader who controls the lines of communication can delay reports long enough to gather troops, persuade uncertain allies, and present the uprising as a finished fact before the king understands its scale. Even a few lost days can matter when loyalty is unstable. Darius learns this during the violent struggles surrounding his accession. Rebellions erupt in several regions, and each crisis competes for the court's attention. Reports arrive from Babylon, Media, Persia, Elam, and more distant territories. Some messages may already be outdated by the time they are read. A city reported as threatened may have fallen. A commander described as loyal may have changed sides. The empire receives information quickly by ancient standards, but never in real time. This delay creates a dangerous gap between the world described in a letter and the world awaiting the royal response. The same problem appears during invasion. A frontier commander may detect enemy movement and dispatch a warning, but the warning must still cross hundreds or thousands of kilometers. The court must assess the report, decide whether it is reliable, issue orders, and then move troops or supplies. A message can travel much faster than an army, yet the army remains bound by roads, fodder, weather, and the endurance of men and animals. Communication therefore improves reaction without guaranteeing success. The king can know more quickly, but knowledge alone does not stop an enemy. The eastern territories make this especially clear. The empire extends into regions of Central Asia and toward the Indus Valley, where distances are enormous and settlements may be widely separated. Roads pass through deserts, steppe, river valleys, and mountain systems unlike the well-documented western route between Susa and Sardis. The surviving evidence for these eastern networks is thinner, and scholars still debate how densely stations were distributed or how consistently royal communication functioned there. What survives in the record suggests that important routes connected eastern satrapies to the imperial centre, but the journey could be long and uncertain. A message from Bactria or Sogdiana might travel through highlands and dry country before reaching the Iranian plateau. In winter, snow could close mountain passes, In summer, heat and lack of water could exhaust horses rapidly. A broken station in a densely settled region was inconvenient. A broken station in an arid landscape could be fatal. Nature did not recognize imperial priority. Heavy rain could turn tracks into mud and swell rivers beyond safe crossing. Floods could sweep away bridges, boats, and approaches. Snow could bury the road and isolate mountain communities for days or weeks. Dust storms could erase landmarks and force riders to stop. Extreme heat could kill horses whose replacements were already weakened by poor fodder. The relay system reduced fatigue, but it could not replace a road that no longer existed. Repair required labor, materials, and time. Timber had to be found for bridges, stone had to be moved, ferries needed new ropes, boats, or crews. A damaged section near an important city might be restored quickly. A remote route could remain disrupted while officials argued over responsibility or waited for resources. The empire's roads were maintained through local obligations, and local communities did not always have the capacity to respond immediately. War made every difficulty worse. Armies consumed fodder, grain, and animals on a scale that could empty stations designed for routine traffic. Horses reserved for couriers might be taken by commanders. Bridges might collapse beneath heavy movement. Soldiers could crowd roads and delay messengers carrying the very orders intended to direct them. An efficient network under peace could become strained almost beyond recognition during a major campaign. Human failure was just as dangerous as weather. A station keeper might sell reserved grain. A local official might conceal the loss of horses. A courier could be bribed to delay a report or reveal its destination. A scribe might alter a message. A governor preparing rebellion might intercept correspondence, replace seals, or prevent royal agents from leaving his territory. The system depends on trust, but trust is most fragile precisely when the information matters most. Secrecy offers only limited protection. A sealed packet may hide its contents, yet patterns of movement can reveal intent. If couriers suddenly ride toward a frontier and military officials begin requisitioning supplies, local observers can guess that war is approaching. A rebellious satrap does not need to read every message if he can control the roads and watch who uses them. The network can even spread panic. An alarming report sent too quickly, without confirmation, may provoke unnecessary mobilization. Rumors can travel beside official correspondence, passed from station to station by servants, guards, merchants, and riders. The royal road carries gossip almost as naturally as it carries orders. By the time the court receives a careful account, exaggerated versions may already be circulating through several provinces. The Persian administration must therefore judge not only how fast information arrives, but how much of it deserves belief. This becomes harder when reports conflict. A governor may insist that rebellion is minor. A military officer may claim the province is near collapse. A royal inspector may report that both are hiding failures. Sending another agent takes time, and waiting for certainty may be more dangerous than acting on incomplete evidence. No single system can eliminate this uncertainty. The road shortens distance, but it does not remove politics, fear, ambition, or error. There is also a limit imposed by scale itself. The empire is so large that several crises can occur at once. Even if messages arrive quickly, the king has only so many troops, trusted commanders, horses, and resources. Speed may reveal problems faster than the state can solve them. A road can deliver 10 urgent warnings in a week, but it cannot create 10 armies. This is the hidden contradiction of imperial communication. The better the network becomes, the more clearly the court sees how much remains beyond immediate control. Still, failure does not make the system unimportant. The Persian roads do not need to be perfect to transform government. They only need to be faster and more reliable than the alternatives. A warning delayed by 3 days may still arrive weeks earlier than it would through ordinary travel. A damaged bridge may slow the relay without stopping it entirely. A corrupt official may interfere with one message while another reaches the court by a different route. The network is resilient because it is not a single fragile line. It is a collection of roads, stations, officials, and possible detours. Yet resilience has boundaries. On a winter night in the mountains, a courier reaches a bridge and finds half of it gone, torn away by flood water. The river below is dark, swollen, and filled with debris. The next station lies on the far bank, close enough for its lamps to be visible. The message has crossed half an empire in days. For the moment, it can go no farther. The most famous description of the Persian courier system comes not from a Persian administrator, but from Herodotus, the Greek historian writing in the 5th century BCE. His account has shaped nearly every later image of the royal road, mounted messengers racing through darkness, fresh horses waiting at measured intervals, and a system so determined that weather itself seems unable to stop it. His words are memorable, but they are also easy to misunderstand. Herodotus describes the route between Sardis and Susa in stages. He counts stations, rivers, and days of ordinary travel, presenting the journey as a sequence that can be measured. According to his reckoning, the road extends through more than 100 stopping places and requires roughly 90 days for a traveller moving at a normal pace. This figure does not describe the time taken by the fastest royal dispatch. It describes a much slower journey, probably one involving regular stops. Ordinary daily distances, and the practical limitations of a traveller who cannot exchange exhausted resources at every stage. The difference between 90 days and the speed of the royal couriers is the entire point of the relay system. Later retellings often claim that Persian messages crossed the full distance between Susa and Sardis in approximately 7 days. The number is dramatic, and it may be physically possible under exceptional conditions. But Herodotus does not provide a simple timetable stating that every royal order completed the journey in exactly 1 week. The estimate is reconstructed by combining his description of the relay with assumptions about station spacing, riding speed, hours of operation, and the absence of major delays. Scholars still debate the result. The distance itself presents the first difficulty. The commonly cited route is roughly 400 kilometers long, but the exact path remains uncertain. Ancient roads do not always follow the shortest modern line. They bend around mountains, approach reliable crossings, pass through administrative centers, and change over time. Identifying every river and station named by Herodotus is difficult, especially where ancient place names have disappeared or where several possible routes cross the same region. Even a modest change in the reconstructed distance affects the speed required. A 7-day crossing of approximately 400 kilometers demands that the message cover more than 340 kilometers every 24 hours. No single horse could sustain anything close to that pace across such terrain, but a relay of fresh horses might. The message would need to keep moving through much of the day and night, with transfers completed rapidly and stations prepared in advance. On open ground, a mounted courier can travel quickly for a limited distance, over mountains, muddy roads, narrow passes, river crossings, and winter conditions. The pace falls sharply, The route includes all of these, and an average speed calculated across the entire journey therefore conceals enormous variation. One stage might be crossed at a gallop, another might require careful movement in darkness along a steep slope. The most important factor is not maximum riding speed, but continuity. An ordinary traveller loses time while sleeping, feeding animals, searching for lodging, negotiating ferries, and allowing a tired horse to recover. The royal relay removes or shortens many of these pauses. Fresh animals wait. Supplies are prepared. Riders know the route. The message can continue while earlier couriers rest. A courier network operating without long nightly stops can outperform an ordinary traveller by an astonishing margin, even when the horses themselves never reach extraordinary speeds. This helps explain why Herodotus's 90-day journey and a much faster dispatch are not necessarily contradictory. They describe different forms of movement. One measures travel by a person crossing the entire distance. The other measures the passage of an object through a chain. Yet the famous claim that neither snow, rain, heat, nor darkness prevents the couriers from completing their stages should not be read as a literal statement that Persian riders were never delayed. Herodotus writes with admiration and rhetorical force. He's expressing the discipline and reputation of the service, not issuing a meteorological guarantee. Flooded rivers, collapsed bridges, deep snow, injury, rebellion, and lost horses could interrupt any ancient road. What survives in the record suggests exceptional reliability by the standards of the time, not perfection. Herodotus also writes from a Greek perspective. He's describing the institutions of a powerful imperial rival to readers fascinated by Persian wealth, scale, and organization. His work combines investigation, oral testimony, geography, political explanation, and memorable storytelling. In some places, his observations are supported by later evidence. In others, details remain disputed or impossible to verify. This does not make his account useless. It makes it a historical source that must be interpreted rather than repeated without question. One surprising detail is that his stage-by-stage measurement may preserve genuine administrative knowledge. The careful counting of stations and distances suggests access to information derived from travellers, officials, guides, or route records. He may not have personally travelled every section, but the structure of his description reflects a world in which roads were officially divided and measured. The Persian administration needed such measurements. Station spacing affected horse supplies, ration demands, travel permits, and expected arrival times. Officials investigating a delayed message had to know how long each stage should normally require. Distance was not an abstract geographical fact, it was an administrative quantity. Still, there was probably no single speed for all correspondence. A routine tax report did not necessarily receive the same priority as news of invasion. A heavy bundle of records moved differently from a short sealed order. An envoy with servants and baggage could not travel like a relay packet. Seasonal conditions changed everything. A route crossed in a week during dry weather might take considerably longer during snowmelt or flood. The 7-day figure, if achievable, likely represents an ideal or urgent performance rather than a universal standard. There is also the human cost to consider. Relays operating through the night require station workers to remain ready, horses to be held in reserve, and riders to depart into conditions that ordinary travellers would avoid. Maintaining such intensity across more than 100 stages demands discipline that cannot be improvised after a message arrives. The entire route must behave as though urgency may appear at any hour. That readiness is what impressed ancient observers. Not merely the speed of one horse, but the scale of preparation behind it. A message leaving Susa does not know whether it will arrive in 7 days, 10 days, or longer. It may lose hours at a river and recover them on an open plain. It may cross one stage beneath moonlight and another through driving rain. No courier sees the complete calculation. Each receives the packet, rides the road before him, and hands it onward. Herodotus measures the stations and the ordinary days. Later historians calculate the possible speed. Between these numbers lies the living system uncertain, adaptable, vulnerable, and still faster than almost anything the ancient world had known. The legend is not that Persia defeated time. It is that Persia organized time into stages and refused to waste more of it than necessary. The royal road survives more clearly in imagination than in the ground. There is no unbroken stone highway running from Susa to Sardis, no continuous line of preserved relay stations waiting to be followed across the mountains and plains, and no archive containing every order that once moved through the system. What remains is scattered a damaged foundation beside an old route, a seal impression, a ration tablet, a fragmentary letter, a description written by an outsider, and the long persistence of roads whose original surfaces have been rebuilt, redirected, or erased. To reconstruct the Persian courier network, historians must assemble evidence created for very different purposes. Greek writers describe what impressed them. Administrative tablets record routine distributions without explaining the entire system. Archaeological sites reveal buildings but not always their exact function. Royal inscriptions celebrate authority rather than logistical difficulty. Each source illuminates one part of the road and leaves another in darkness. The most frustrating absence is the correspondence itself. The empire must have produced enormous numbers of letters. Kings wrote to governors, satraps reported to the court, officials requested supplies, confirmed appointments, answered accusations, and transmitted orders to subordinates. Yet only a small fraction survives. This is not because written communication was rare. It is because the materials most useful for travel were also among the least durable. A clay tablet can survive fire, collapse, and centuries underground, but it is heavy. Leather, papyrus, and parchment-like materials are lighter, flexible, and much better suited to horseback transport. In most environments, however, they decay. Moisture destroys fibers. Insects feed on organic material. Repeated handling wears surfaces away. A letter that crossed the empire successfully may have disappeared soon after its administrative value ended. The silence of the archive is therefore deceptive. One of the clearest surviving bodies of evidence comes from the Persepolis fortification tablets, a vast collection of administrative records from the reign of Darius. These tablets document the distribution of food, wine, grain, livestock, and travel rations to workers and officials moving through the Persian heartland. They do not describe the Susa to Sardis courier system stage by stage, but they reveal the machinery that made official travel possible. People moving under authorization receive provisions at particular places. Their journeys are recorded. Groups are identified by status, destination, or task. Animals and supplies are counted. The tablets show that movement was organized rather than informal, and that the state maintained procedures for supporting authorized travelers across considerable distances. Some records refer indirectly to documents written in Aramaic, probably on perishable material. Ink traces and sealing suggest a parallel documentary world that has largely vanished. The clay archive is therefore only the durable shadow of a larger system. For every tablet that survives, there may once have been letters, permits, notes, and summaries that left no readable remains. Other discoveries preserve fragments of imperial correspondence under unusual conditions. In Egypt, the dry climate has protected Aramaic papyri and leather documents from military communities and administrators living under Persian rule. These texts show officials communicating across distances, managing supplies, handling legal affairs, and appealing to higher authorities. They do not provide a complete manual for the royal post, but they demonstrate that written Aramaic correspondence functioned as a practical instrument of government far from the Persian heartland. Seals provide another category of evidence. Their impressions appear on tablets, containers, and documents. Some identify officials or offices, others display imagery associated with authority, rank, or personal identity. A sealed letter could move through many stations without being opened, while the mark on its exterior told administrators that it belonged within an official chain. The survival of seal impressions also reveals how much the system depended on recognition. A courier's claim to authority was not enough. He needed something that could be checked. The seal connected an object to an office and allowed trust to travel farther than personal acquaintance. Archaeology along the roads is more difficult to interpret. Buildings identified as stations may also have served as forts, warehouses, administrative compounds, caravan shelters, or local residences. A courtyard large enough for animals does not prove that royal couriers changed horses there. Storerooms and defensive walls fit several possible functions. The evidence remains incomplete, and scholars still debate the identification of many supposed relay sites. This uncertainty is especially important because later observers often label any substantial roadside building a Persian postal station. The name is attractive, but archaeology rarely provides such certainty. A genuine station may have combined several roles, serving messengers, officials, troops, and supply traffic at once. Ancient infrastructure did not always divide functions as neatly as modern categories suggest. The roads themselves are equally elusive. Some stretches followed routes used for thousands of years and remain important today. Others have been buried beneath later tracks, agricultural land, cities, or modern highways. Erosion removes surfaces. Rivers shift course. Mountain passes are abandoned when new routes become easier. The Persian road may survive not as visible construction, but as continuity of movement through the same geographic corridor. Researchers reconstruct these routes by comparing ancient place names, travel distances, river crossings, topography, settlement patterns, and later roads. The result is persuasive in broad outline but uncertain in detail. Several alternative paths may fit the same ancient description. A station mentioned by Herodotus may correspond to more than one archaeological site, or to none yet identified. This is where romance can overtake evidence. Modern retellings sometimes imagine a perfectly engineered highway with identical stations, standardized uniforms, exact schedules, and couriers operating according to rules that would not look out of place in a modern postal service. The real system was probably more flexible and uneven. Some regions were carefully supplied, others relied on local arrangements. Some stages may have functioned with remarkable efficiency, while others failed during war, winter, or shortage. There is also little support for the image of a public postal network available to ordinary inhabitants. The Persian service was primarily governmental. Merchants and private travellers benefited from safer routes and roadside settlements, but they could not automatically claim royal horses and provisions. The speed celebrated by ancient observers belonged to authorized communication. Separating fact from legend does not diminish the achievement. It makes the achievement more human. The Persians did not create a flawless machine. They coordinated inherited roads, regional knowledge, local labor, animal power, writing systems, and administrative authority across an extraordinary space. The network functioned not because every element was standardized, but because enough elements were reliable enough, often enough, to make rapid imperial communication possible. The strongest evidence is cumulative. No single tablet proves the entire system. No surviving building explains every station. No Greek account can be accepted without caution. But together they reveal a state deeply concerned with authorized movement, rationed travel, written orders, seals, roads, and the speed of information. A leather letter disappears, a station collapses, a bridge is rebuilt until its Persian phase can no longer be seen. Yet the administrative traces remain, scattered across archives and landscapes. The road survives not as one monument, but as a pattern. When Alexander's armies enter the Persian Empire in the late 4th century BCE, they do not advance through an unknown world. They move along routes maintained by the state they are destroying. Bridges, storehouses, provincial centers, and roads guide troops toward the great cities of Asia. Messages travel ahead of marching columns. Reports of battles, defections, and approaching armies pass between governors who must decide whether to resist, surrender, or preserve their own power. The Achaemenid monarchy collapses, but the landscape of communication does not vanish with it. Conquerors inherit roads more easily than they inherit legitimacy. Alexander can seize royal capitals and distribute Persian treasure. Yet he also depends on Persian administrative knowledge to govern territories extending far beyond Macedonia. Existing officials remain useful. Scribes continue writing. Local authorities continue collecting supplies. The roads that once carried orders from Darius III begin carrying commands issued in the name of his conqueror. This is one of the clearest signs that the Persian communication network was more than the personal creation of a single dynasty. It had become embedded in the practical geography of government. Any ruler attempting to control Iran, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and the lands farther east faced the same ancient problem. Mountains did not move. Rivers did not shorten, and distant governors did not become obedient merely because a new king occupied the palace. The solutions developed under Persian rule remained useful because the problem remained unchanged. After Alexander's death, his empire fragments among rival successors. The Seleucid rulers control much of the former Achaemenid territory, though their power rises and falls unevenly. They establish new cities and introduce Greek and Macedonian institutions. Yet they continue relying on major routes that had connected the region long before them. Couriers, officials, armies, merchants, and tax shipments move between provincial centres and royal courts. The names of rulers change. But the strategic value of Susa, Babylon, the Iranian plateau, and the Anatolian corridors does not. Later Iranian powers inherit the same logic, the Parthian Empire emerging from the northeast and eventually controlling much of Iran and Mesopotamia, governs through a looser political structure than the Achaemenids. Powerful noble families and regional rulers possess considerable autonomy. Communication is therefore no less important, though the surviving evidence for a centralized Parthian relay system remains incomplete. What survives suggests continued use of long-distance roads. mounted messengers, and administrative correspondence, but scholars still debate how closely Parthian practice resembled the Achaemenid model. The Sasanian Empire, which replaces Parthian rule in the 3rd century CE, develops a more centralized state and maintains extensive routes connecting royal centers, frontier fortresses, provincial administrations, and military zones. Official messengers carry reports between the court and regions facing Rome, Central Asia, Arabia, and the Persian Gulf. Stations, animals, and authorized travel again become instruments of rule. The terminology and organization change, but the basic principle remains recognizable. The state moves information through prepared stages faster than ordinary travelers can move. The road also carries intelligence. Under later Iranian governments, postal communication and surveillance become increasingly difficult to separate. Officials responsible for moving royal correspondence may also report on provincial governors, military conditions, prices, unrest, and the loyalty of local elites. A message system naturally becomes an information-gathering system because those who supervise the roads observe who travels, what resources move, and where unusual activity is beginning. This relationship becomes especially visible under the early Islamic caliphates. After Arab armies defeat the Sasanian state in the 7th century CE, they inherit an enormous territory whose administration draws upon Roman, Byzantine, and Persian precedents. Among the institutions that emerge is the Barid, an official postal and intelligence service connecting the caliphal court with provincial authorities. The Barid uses stations, messengers, fresh mounts, and established routes to carry orders and reports. Its agents may observe governors, inspect local conditions, and send confidential information toward the center. The caliph's message travels outward, but the caliph's knowledge travels inward. The dual purpose would have been immediately understandable to an Achaemenid ruler. There is no simple unbroken institutional line proving that every feature of the Islamic Barid descended directly from Darius's system. Governments borrow from several traditions, adapt to new technologies, and reorganize institutions according to changing political needs. Roman and Byzantine communication networks also shape the administrative world inherited by the caliphates. No single explanation fully accounts for the later postal intelligence systems of Western Asia. Yet the Persian contribution is difficult to ignore. For more than 1,000 years, states governing the Iranian plateau and its neighboring regions repeatedly return to the same set of solutions: protected routes, official credentials, prepared stations, fresh animals, written correspondence, provincial reports, and agents who represent the ruler far from the court. The names change because languages and dynasties change. The practical requirements endure. Even beyond direct institutional inheritance, the Persian system leaves a powerful idea an empire can reduce distance through organization. Geography appears fixed, but political distance is partly created by delay. A province that requires 3 months to reach is more independent than one that can receive an order in days. A rebellious governor who controls information controls the time available to respond. A ruler who shortens that time transforms the shape of authority without moving any frontier. The royal road also influences how later observers imagine communication itself. The admired Persian riders become symbols of relentless duty. Centuries after the Achaemenid Empire disappears, the description of couriers continuing through darkness, heat, rain, and snow remains memorable because it expresses more than physical speed. It suggests a chain in which every person accepts responsibility for one stage and trust that another person will accept the next. Modern postal services operate through technologies the Persians could never have imagined: railways, motor vehicles, aircraft, electronic sorting, and digital tracking. Yet the relay principle survives. A package does not usually remain with one carrier from sender to destination. It passes through offices, vehicles, sorting points, and regional networks. Human endurance is replaced by coordinated transfer. The object keeps moving while the people and machines serving it change. The same idea lies beneath communication cables, data networks, and systems of satellites. Information is divided, transmitted, redirected, verified, and delivered through infrastructure distributed across great distances. The technology is new. The administrative insight is ancient. Persia's achievement should not be exaggerated into a flawless system or treated as the beginning of every later postal institution. Earlier states had used roads and couriers, and other civilizations developed sophisticated communication independently. The Achaemenid network was vulnerable to weather, corruption, warfare, and human failure. It served imperial authority rather than the public, and its speed rested on labor and resources extracted from communities along the road. Yet its scale changed what was politically possible. A king at Susa could make a decision whose effects reached western Anatolia before an ordinary traveller had crossed a fraction of the route. A governor could no longer assume that mountains guaranteed silence. A frontier commander could report danger while there was still time to react. Inspectors could arrive carrying authority that had crossed the empire ahead of them. Persia ruled many peoples without making them identical. It held several royal centers without fixing power permanently in one city. It governed landscapes divided by deserts, rivers, and mountains. Such an empire could not survive through conquest alone. It required connection repeated every day, through ordinary acts performed with extraordinary consistency. A scribe finishes a letter, a seal presses into soft material, a stable worker leads out a horse, a rider enters the road. At the next station, another rider waits. The king's voice is not carried by one man. It is carried by the system. Long after the couriers are gone, the roads remain beneath other roads. Hooves give way to wheels, wheels to engines, and messages that once required days begin crossing the same distances without any visible traveller at all. These stations collapse. Their walls are reused in villages, buried beneath fields, or reduced to low ridges that no passing traveller notices. The names of their keepers disappear completely. Susa becomes a ruin, Sardis loses its kings, Persepolis burns, stands empty, and slowly becomes a place where stone figures watch visitors from another age. Empires rise over the routes and vanish from them. Their officials speak different languages, carry different seals, and invoke different rulers, yet they continue confronting the same land. The mountains still hold snow, rivers still flood, deserts still punish those who misjudge water. Distance remains real even when technology makes it feel small. Perhaps that is why the Persian riders continue to occupy the imagination. They belong to a moment when communication was visibly physical. Every message had weight, every kilometre had to be crossed. An order could be delayed by a tired animal, a broken bridge, or a night of heavy rain. Information did not float beyond the landscape. It struggled through it, and still the message moved. Not because any rider was tireless, and not because the empire had defeated nature, but because someone had prepared a horse before it was needed, someone had stored grain, someone had guarded a crossing, Someone had learned the road through the mountains. Thousands of people, separated by language and distance, performed small tasks that allowed a decision to travel farther than any one of them ever would. The monuments of Persia proclaim kingship in stone, but the roads reveal something quieter. Civilization is held together not only by rulers, armies, and grand buildings. It survives through connections that must be maintained again and again, often by people whose names are never recorded. In the fading light, a rider disappears beyond a ridge. The station behind him grows silent. Far ahead, another lamp is already burning beside the road. The message has not arrived, but it is still moving.